Hello and welcome to our broadcast. I'm your host, Oriana Turley. As a reminder, the information provided during this event is for information purposes only. For medical questions, please reach out to your primary healthcare provider or other healthcare professional. Joining me today is Sarah Johnson, who's an RN and the RN Sustainability Program Manager at Providence in Montana. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Welcome, Oriana. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad to be here today.
To get us started, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your role here at Providence?
Yes, so I started out as a floor nurse and then moved into a position as the RN Sustainability Program Manager. I work with leaders and directors throughout our hospital and frontline caregivers as well to advance our environmental stewardship goals and initiatives to meet our carbon negative 2030 goal. I track and manage these initiatives and programs, working to reduce efficiency or increasing efficiency, not reducing, and reducing the hospital's impact in the areas of waste, energy, water, agriculture, chemicals, transportation. And one of the favorite aspects of my job is getting to collaborate with community partners, which I'll talk more about today, to create a healthy, equitable, and sustainable future for our community.
Great. And today we're here to talk a little bit about the Providence Healing Garden. Can you tell us how that program got started?
Yeah, so this program started in 2014. We had a vacant lot behind one of our buildings, and this lot had, there were a couple of generous donors that thought that it had a bigger value to our community. So St. Patrick's Hospital, our Green for Good team, teamed up with Garden City Harvest, a really great community organization, to build this therapeutic community garden space, a partnership which continues today. We continue to help fund resources that are needed for the garden and Garden City Harvest staff. They built the garden and then continue to maintain the staff today.
Incredible. What were the intended goals for the garden, Sarah?
The intended goals, it was meant to be multi-purpose. It was built to be a therapeutic space for patients, respite space for caregivers, to beautify the neighborhood. The garden has served as an outdoor classroom for staff, patients, and community members. There's been gardening tips and tricks shared. Occupational therapists and physical therapists have taken patients out there for therapy sessions. And then there's also the outer areas that touch the sidewalk are all flowers, which are often found to be buzzing with pollinators, local pollinators. It's a beautiful addition to our local neighborhood.
Wow, that's great. And how have patients been able to learn more about the health benefits of fresh produce in particular?
Yeah, so Garden City Harvest staff, they have many resources for our community, and they share the benefits of fresh produce with staff, visitors, and volunteers who enter the garden if they're working there. People can walk through the garden and are welcome to touch, smell, pick whatever is growing. And one of the most important aspects of this garden is that it started out as the home for our prescription produce program. For the first years of this garden, the produce grown in our healing garden was available to patients at weekly on site at the garden, and patients were able to talk with the growers and health coaches and use a voucher to literally purchase fresh vegetables, fruits and vegetables, and learn how to use them. And they built these beautiful, trusting relationships with the growers and the health coaches that allowed them to incorporate more fresh fruits and vegetables into their diets with confidence.
Wow, so it sounds like nutritionalists may actually be able to refer to the garden to prescribe produce to their patients. Is that correct?
That's correct. So any provider within our local Providence system can refer a patient to our prescription produce program, including nutritionists. All that's needed to happen for this referral is that a patient needs to express a need for more fresh fruits and vegetables in their diet. One of the things that sets this program apart is that we have, SNAP benefits at more of a state level and a federal level, but people that are referred to this program are not they're not kicked out of the program for income. So it's able to actually accommodate a wider range of income levels than our SNAP program. And so we're serving a larger portion of our community.
Wow. And what about caregivers? Are there benefits for caregivers as well?
Talking with Emily in preparation for this interview, Emily works for Garden City Harvest and has managed the garden for the last few years. She talked about how staff come out for fresh air and they come and sit, and she'll talk with them about the produce that's growing, what's coming along, and she'll invite them to take extra produce if they have it or pick flowers to take home. And then COVID years aside, we've hosted a garden party in the garden every single year, where Garden City Harvest staff prepares food for the caregivers that are invited to come, and we have local musicians, and it's been a really nice, it was a really nice thing that we had done before COVID, and we hope to get back to in future years.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about environmental stewardship. I know this is a topic that you are well versed in relation to the garden. How are local produce and the environment related?
Oh gosh. So aside from being a nurse at the bedside, I also have been working in the farming world for about 10 years. So this is an area that's very near and dear to my heart, as an owner of a small farm. So local produce and the environment, it's really impossible to separate food production, processing, and distribution from our environment. Much of the food that we eat every day is grown in soil. Of course, there are other ways to grow food as well, hydroponically, but you're still interacting with the environment through your use of water and waste products from the hydroponic growing. And the way that the food we grow in the soil, it impacts the surrounding soil, water systems, local neighborhood, and the methods that are used to grow impact the environment directly around it and the people that are working the land, whether they're working in larger agricultural systems that are using harmful pesticides. They're working with that every day in the heat, smoke. And, here I was just reading an article before this interview that talked about how within Missoula, Montana, our hardiness zone has changed over the past 25 years. We've actually become one zone warmer than we were historically. And so they're really intricately linked.
Wow. And so, yeah, so many ways that community gardens and small farms are beneficial to the environment, it sounds like then. Is there any kind of education that's provided to staff and or patients around this topic?
I'm going to go back to your first question and just talk a little bit more about community gardens and small farms. I feel like I had a few more points that I would like to just hammer out.
Absolutely.
So within our community, we have this really robust, we have been called Garden City, which Garden City Harvest got its name from the fact that Missoula used to historically known as the Garden City because we had so many farms and gardens throughout our city and surrounding areas. And that continues today. And the growers that we have today are really committed to sustainable and regenerative growing methods, including Garden City Harvest, which manages our healing garden. And this means that they use methods that are focused specifically on enhancing our local ecosystem, using soil building methods, cover cropping, conserving water, supporting local pollinators. And they typically steer clear of harmful pesticides, monocropping, excessive animal waste, and excessive tillage, things which degrade our environment. And so these small farms, they're really working to keep our community beautiful into the long term, which is right in alignment with our 2030 goal of being carbon negative. Is these farms that are using these methods are typically less carbon emitting than farms that are using different agricultural methods, more conventional methods.
Great. Thank you for expanding on that. Yeah, that's very important. Did you have something else to add, Sarah?
I don't think so.
That's fine. So let's circle back to education. Is there any kind of education provided to staff and or patients around this topic?
Yes. So we have a number of ways from the Providence side that we communicate about this garden space. We have multiple things that go out, caregiver news, Green for Good news, that have been focused specifically on the garden. And we we have hosted previously a local class that talks about uh, beginning farming tips for people who don't know anything about gardening. They're able to learn what it takes to get a garden started in Western Montana. Um, and then we've also been able to we were able to focus on health. We had a health break that was focused on our garden as well. And a health break we focus on multiple different health impacts of our hospital and positive things that are happening. And this was shared on local news throughout the later summer. And so our staff have really been able to engage in several different ways, including on our Providence SharePoint site. We maintain a Green for Good Providence Garden page that specifically has updates throughout the season of what's growing, what's coming, and what's happening with the produce.
Great, great. That's awesome. And since we know that produce has a shelf life, what's done with the surplus produce?
This is a great question. So obviously, produce does not last forever. It does have that shelf life, as you mentioned, and the surplus produce from our garden currently gets donated to our local food bank.
Wow, that's incredible. Are there any other ways that the garden integrates into the community?
Yes, there are. So when talking with Emily at Garden City Harvest, one of her most notable uses of the garden was as a demonstration and education site where they create teaching videos for folks throughout the community. This was not an original intended use of this site, but it's something that developed kind of organically with COVID. When Garden City Harvest found that they weren't able to utilize their normal methods of teaching, they really sought out the site and committed to doing these weekly, like 3 to 10 minute videos throughout all of last year. And then because it was so popular, and these are free to the community, because it was so popular, they continued doing this. They take photos of what's growing, what produce is growing weekly for their blog, The Real Dirt. And The Real Dirt covers everything from cooking the food that you're growing, how to harvest, how to extend your season. It really has all of these great tips and tricks. And they teach people about things like succession planting, sustainable gardening methods, composting tea, vertical gardening, cover crops. They've really used the space to inform people on the sustainable gardening methods, which expands sustainability within our local food system and in the community. For both Providence and Garden City Harvest, both are entities which are focused on health and wellness. This is a wonderful example of marrying our two missions.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share, Sarah, that we haven't yet covered?
Yeah, there are a few things. So going back to the question about where we donate food, we have donated so much food to the food bank. It's been, we donate about 800 to or 700 to like 1,200 pounds per year to the local food bank. And since
Wow.
2014, that is roughly the size of a small Asian elephant, which is, around 6,000 to 8,000 pounds, depending on the year and what's coming out of it. I think it's also worth noting that our prescription produce program, it started in this space of our community garden, which is actually a fairly small space. I don't know the dimensions exactly. Obviously, it's putting out a good amount of produce every year, but our prescription produce program outgrew the amount of produce available. And so we had to switch gears. Garden City Harvest came to us and said, we can't supply all of the people that you are giving prescriptions to for fresh produce. And so it allowed us to build and nurture another community partnership with our local agricultural community through our farmers markets. So now patients who are getting these prescription produce vouchers, they can purchase produce from our local farmers markets almost year round. We have a really robust markets within Missoula. We have the one that runs from about May through the end of October, and another one that starts from November and runs through about late April. So there's really hardly a gap in the year. And these run weekly on Thursdays and Saturdays, or Wednesdays and Saturdays. And so it really gives people that ability to go out into the community and make relationships with our local growers, learn where their food is coming from. And, not only are they investing money back into our growers and supporting our growers long term, but they're learning more about the food, where it comes from, what's in season, how to cook it, etc.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today. That was extremely informational, and there's so many resources available that I didn't even know about. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you to everybody for listening and sending in your questions. To learn more about our initiatives, programs, services, and ways to give, or if you're looking for medical care, please visit providence.org. And make sure to follow us on social media at Providence Health Systems for LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and under Providence on Twitter. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.